Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here today. My name is Andrea Ray, and on behalf of the full organizing committee of this candidate forum for the 33rd Legislative District, it is my honor to welcome you all here tonight, and I'll be serving as your moderator and facilitator. Thank you to all that made this event possible: the Highline Times, South King Media, the King County Library, the League of Women Voters, and retired City Council member Rose Clark, who serves as our forum chair. I just want to take a moment to outline briefly how this forum will be conducted. We're here this evening to learn more about our candidates for the State House of Representatives for the 33rd District. Running for Legislative District 33, State Representative Position 1 are Carrie French and Tina Orwell. For Position 2, Mia Sulein Gregerson and Marlisa Melzer. Each candidate will have an opportunity to introduce themselves to you directly. They have 2 minutes for opening statements, and we will start with Position 1 and then just go in alphabetical order. We'll then transition into Q&A. As Vicki mentioned, if you have questions for the candidates, go ahead and type those into the chat, direct those to Q&A for candidates, and we will be getting to those questions. Remember that each question that you pose will be posed to each candidate, so it should be appropriate for each candidate to answer. Each candidate will then have up to 90 seconds to respond to the questions, and we will do our best to rotate what candidate answers first, and all candidates will have an opportunity to answer every question. We hope to get to about 6 or 8 questions, time permitting, so we won't be able to get to every question. Candidates are only to speak when it's their time to speak. They are able to unmute and mute themselves when it's their turn to speak. And then again, at the end, we'll have 2 minutes for the candidates to deliver a closing statement. We hope to end no later than around 6:55, because immediately following this candidate forum for the 33rd District, we also have a forum for the 11th District, which is immediately following this. So if you're interested in attending both, we're so happy that you're here. Just know that you'll stay on for a little longer to hear from the candidates for the 11th. And just a quick, hopefully unnecessary reminder to all of our candidates to please just respect our culture of kindness and inclusion. Do not address each other, address the attendees, and that any behavior that is disrespectful or disruptive will not be tolerated. Ken Robinson from the Highline Times, if you want to give a wave, Ken, will be tracking your time, so he will help you stay on target with your time. Again, we hope that you respect the time and can mute yourself. If not, then we do reserve the right to mute you. And without further ado, let's get started with those opening statements. For Position 1, Carrie French, you are first.
Well, thank you. I hope everyone can hear me. My name is Carrie French, and I had absolutely no intention of running for a political office. I have run some state campaigns before, and I know how much work it is, but I just decided to run as a write-in candidate when I saw Representative Orwell running unopposed. And so I just felt like the people of the 33rd District deserve a choice. And so a little bit about me, I'm born and raised in Washington State, but I did spend 20 years outside of the state when I was serving this country in the United States Navy. I retired from the Navy out of Naval Base Kitsap in Bremerton. So I have lived all over the state. I'm a plank owner of Naval Station Everett, and I've lived all over the world. I was a religious program specialist. So I have had a lot of experience dealing with different cultures and different religions, and I have supported all of them to the best of my ability while I was in the Navy. And so I have a lot of experience with that. I have been very active since I came home, since I retired in the political realm. I've been an arts commissioner. I've been a professional singer. I also have a forensic degree and a paralegal degree, and I'm just in my finals week for my government degree with a pre-law emphasis. So I'm not necessarily a one issue person. I care about a lot of things. I care about property rights and parental rights. And I care about our economy and the ability for people to make a living. And so I decided to run in this race. So yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ms. French. And now Representative Tina Orwell.
Thank you. I'm Tina Orwell. I've had the honor of representing the 33rd Legislative District in Olympia. A little bit about me. I'm a proud mom. I have 2 children that went through the Highline School District. My daughter, Jenna, is now getting her master's in special ed, and my son is in his 3rd year of apprenticeship. And part of the reason I went to Olympia was really to make sure that all kids have a pathway to be successful. Being a legislator is like all professions. It's a team sport. And I'm really proud to really build relationships with all levels of government. I work closely with community leaders, and I'd like to tackle complex issues faced by our community. I've worked on foreclosure, suicide prevention, combating trafficking of children, and all of these take incredible partnerships. And I know we're in stressful times now, and I look forward to working with all the community leaders and the elected officials at all levels to make sure we can support families and struggling businesses as we get through this pandemic and build a better future. Thank you.
Thank you. Now Representative Mia Sulein Gregerson.
Hi, well, thank you so much for putting on this forum tonight. And I'm really excited to have this conversation. A little bit about me is I'm one of 4 generations out here in SeaTac. I was adopted and grew up on a public education with great resources. I live with my mom lives upstairs, so I'm an example of living with your elders and making sure that we're having a place to live with dignity. I have been an elected official now since 2007, where I was a SeaTac City Council and SeaTac. And then of course I was appointed in 2013. I sit on chair for state government and tribal relations. I'm the newest member of appropriations. I'd really like to go back to Olympia. We have a lot of decisions that we need to make. We need to prepare for hunger for over 2 million people. We need to get people back to work. We need to deal with the housing and homelessness crisis. We need to deal with a $4.4 billion budget deficit, be able to look at tax reform so it's a less regressive system, and close the digital divide. So, lots of work to do. I've been working very hard and excited to talk a little bit more about that tonight.
Thank you. Marlisa Meltzer.
62-year-old mother of 3 and a longtime graduate of Central Washington University. I served 4 years on the board of the North Highline Unincorporated Area Council. It was a long time ago, like 25 years ago, where I was instrumental in helping get a new play structure for Southern Heights Elementary School, as well as new concrete sidewalks on Des Moines Memorial Drive. They had been old asphalt sidewalks they were all rickety, and they had light posts in the middle of them. A young mother or a grandparent, and nobody could walk with a baby carriage down the sidewalk with those posts in there, let alone bicycles or skateboards or anything else. I served for 2 years on the board of the Boulevard Park Community Council, which is now defunct. And I served for about 10 years as a neighborhood block watch captain in my community. So I'm running for office mostly due to out of hand taxation. I understand that we need taxes, but even when we had a surplus last year, our legislature, including my opponent, voted for more to the tune of $27 billion in new taxes. And I've heard it said that, well, maybe the people need to know what those taxes are for. It doesn't matter. You can only tax people so much. I'm good.
Perfect. And now you know what the sound of the bell sounds like. So it's the little chime. And again, appreciate you respecting our time. And we are going to questions. So we have questions coming in from the attendees. Really appreciate everybody who, again, if you have a question for the candidates, please remember, go ahead and type that into Q&A for candidates in the chat, and we will do our best to get to it. So the first question, many of you touched on this in your opening statements. How do you think the state budget will be impacted by COVID-19 emergency spending? And since Marlisa, you were the last to speak for opening statements, you get the honor of answering this question first.
Okay, and the question is?
How do you think the state budget will be impacted by COVID-19 emergency spending?
I don't think it's how it will be impacted. It's already been impacted. To the degree, I don't know. I'm not privy to a lot of that information at this time, being a layperson. But wow, it's going to be an uphill battle. I think all the departments are going to have to be encouraged to cut wherever they can. I think to put more tax burdens on people is unconscionable. I think audits are going to have to be done. And I know that sometimes departments will re-up the budget from the previous year if they use all the money. And I think that we need to take a better look at how to give departments what they need and not give them just what they had last year or the year before, and make sure that they spend it all, because I think then we have spending that we don't need to be spending. And being a mom, having budgeted always forever with very limited means, you have to get creative sometimes and move things around and make things happen.
Thank you so much. Mia Sulein Gregerson, the question again is, how do you think the state budget will be impacted by COVID-19 emergency spending?
Yeah, we have already been preparing for that since before we left session last year. We allocated $100 million already to help deal with the crisis. And as you know, the governor has been making decisions with the CARES dollars, and that's typically a four corners agreement. So our caucuses have been meeting every week since session went into sine die. And we're listening to agencies now come forward with their decision packages, and we're questioning every line item. We know that staff has been furloughing at least one day a week to take care and to hopefully, close the gap as much as possible. We know we're preparing for a $4.4 billion deficit. We have a rainy day fund. We will all be talking about that. That's what that's about. We also know that we had significant fires. And so we're still trying to uncover some of the costs that we've incurred since we've been out of session, to be responsible and transparent about what our decisions are. And those are going to be hard. But across the board cuts is not what we're interested in. And we're also interested in centering racial equity in our work.
So much. And Tina Orwell.
Great, thank you. No, and I really appreciate Representative Gregerson's response. And yes, we are meeting on a regular basis, looking at this situation. Originally, we thought it was going to be an $8 billion deficit. It's now at $4 billion, which is still very concerning. I'm glad we're implementing efficiencies and budget reviews with our state government. I think that's critical. For the first ending biennium, we do have the budget stabilization account, or what's known as the rainy day funds, which is really going to help us in this first step. Down the road, we have to be very careful. We know we have families and businesses that are struggling. And so again, I think we need to look carefully at our budget and move forward carefully to make sure we're supporting those that need help right now. Having additional federal dollars is going to be really important as well. And we are advocating and working with congressional staff. Again, that will help all levels of government and will help businesses. If we put it in our UI, insurance, that certainly is going to help the business community as well as families. Thank you.
Thank you. Carrie French, again, the question is, how do you think the state budget will be impacted by COVID-19 emergency spending?
Well, I think it's self-evident that this pandemic that has happened was not expected. And so, like any unexpected emergency that comes up, it blows a hole in your budget. So when that happens in a family, you have to find ways to either increase your revenue or decrease your expenses. And so I think that prioritizing the budget is going to be important. And prioritizing is not slashing and dashing. That's a lovely hyperbolic rhetorical term, but it's not what I don't think anybody wants to do. So, but we have to take a look at what we're spending, and we have to take a look at possible cuts, and we have to take a look at possibly rearranging the way we do taxes. I know the B&O tax is really hurting the small businesses. And so there are a lot of things that we need to take a look at, to make sure that we can make up that $4.4 billion deficit. And yes, granted, it's not 8 billion, thank God, but it's 4 billion. I don't know about you, but that's a lot of money to me. So, you know, maybe in government, that's a drop in the bucket, but that's a huge number to me. And so I'm hoping that that both sides of the aisle can come together and do what's good for the state and make sure that we don't already increase a bad situation and make it worse. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Carrie French, you were last for that first question, and so you're going to be first for this next question.
Okay.
So this question is, the University of Washington has completed an initial study of ultrafine particles from airplane emissions and is working on follow-up studies. What do you think should happen next to help people who are impacted by the ultrafine particles and other air pollution from airport operations?
Well, thank you for that question. I do have a degree in forensics, so I did have to learn the scientific method, and part of that is following the evidence. And so I don't have access to the study you just told me about, but I would just have the scientists follow the evidence, and if there are people impacted in that, we would need to take a look at how we can lessen the impact of that to average people in Washington state. Although my degree is in forensics, it is not in occupational health. So I would probably defer to the experts on what can be done to mitigate those effects on our citizens in this state.
Thank you. Tina Orwell.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm really proud of our community. We had a lot of community leaders that really have raised this issue of air quality and asthma. And the University of Washington, we did reach out with community leaders, and we partnered with them to do the first round of air quality work. It's called the Move Up Study. The state invested about $250,000 to help look at the footprint and the pollution that's caused by the airport. And it's really important work. Ultrafine particles are not regulated by the FAA or the EPA. And so it's really cutting edge to look at what's going on. What we found is that there are high levels, and they're very concentrated that come down to the ground outdoors. And so the next step is really working with the University of Washington and the community partners to start looking at indoor air pollution. And we're starting with schools. And so we've been working with the Federal Way and the Highline School District and the Seattle School District. So they want to go in and do measurements. And of course, their schools already have air filtration, but we want to make sure, can we do something better? You know, can we use MERS 13 or stronger filtrations or bring in units? And again, you know, having clean air for our kids is important. COVID's an issue. They talk about opening windows, but when you live in an airport community, that actually may make it difficult to study, as well as air pollution. So I'm really hoping the UW can move us forward to address this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Mia Sulein Gregerson.
Thank you. Well, I'm really proud to have both Representative Orwell and Senator Kaiser leading this effort. We just met with both the Federal Way School District and the Highline School District to make sure that there's buy-in for this next study or this next round of work. And that's just an example of how we need to work with our partners, regardless of the levels of jurisdiction. We need to be really thoughtful and creative on ensuring that we're building not only a level of awareness, especially if we want to do a messaging campaign or education campaign on this. As you heard, Representative Orwell talked about, opening your windows is not actually the best case solution. It's actually about investing potentially in air filters and other things. But living here in SeaTac, you know, we're very familiar with pollution, whether it's stormwater, whether it's air or noise. And so again, it's just really building political will and awareness and moving forward with those mitigation strategies. So I'm really appreciative for all the work that's been done already. Thank you.
And Marlisa Meltzer. Marlisa, you got, sorry, we have to unmute you. We'll restart your time. You're good.
I'm sorry, I know I was going to unmute it and I didn't. So anyhow, I'm probably the only one of the four of us here who actually lives in the flight path. And so I have had days when I've opened my window with a screen on the window, and there's still sometimes on some days it's bad, and there's like black residue on the windowsill. Doesn't happen very often. Sometimes it's a little greasy. We've seen things dumped in the air over here. Cancers have been very high here, especially glioblastoma. There was a huge amount of it identified back when they were doing the noise insulation on the houses out here. So mitigating that, I used air filters, and they seem to work pretty well. And that doesn't help for going outside, but it's definitely an issue that needs to be addressed. And I'm not a scientist, so I can't come up with anything greatly scientific to do about it, but definitely something does need to be done. The air quality is poor.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Going to mix it up a little bit with the order here. This question will go to Mia Sulein Gregerson first. What issues exist in your district that you want the legislature to address?
Well, I think specific to the district right now, that's front in my mind is the digital divide. Up until COVID, it really wasn't as apparent because there were so many different places that we could go to get access to free and fast internet, whether it was your local Starbucks or your schools or your libraries. And once COVID hit, and we were forced to work from home or schools were closed, it really was a stark reminder that we have got to make sure that we have affordable, fast enough internet with the appropriate devices and digital literacy skills that we need, especially for our children, K through 12. We have high numbers of students that have never logged in, and parents who are not experts at navigating the internet to help their children. We have foster parents who need respite and help when it comes to making sure that their children, their students have access to the internet. And then we have elders who need access to the internet so that they can check their email or do telehealth appointments. And so I think that that's a really, really important thing that we need to be talking about, whether it's a statewide one-to-one initiative, whether it's a new universal services fund, building out the infrastructure, charitable giving around 25/3 internet plans is just not fast enough. If you have a working parent and two students in the house, the internet's just not fast enough. Thank you.
Thank you. The question, Marlisa Melser, again, what issues exist in your district that you want the legislature to address?
One that has come up that Mia touched on was I'm a proponent of community internet. I know I've been to a lot of communities where they have that, and it's better than it isn't. That aside, I would go to parental rights. Currently, our legislature, there's an initiative to overturn the explicit sexual education starting in kindergarten. And I took the liberty of going to a bookstore. I found one of the books on the list, the approved list for the curriculum. And in 4th grade, 10 years and over, they have very explicit pictures of showing missionary position. They have pictures of a woman, a young girl actually, bending over with a mirror, looking at her anus and her other private parts, and has everything itemized and listed. I was going to show it, but we couldn't show anything, so I didn't. But I'm pretty appalled with that. Being a parent, I want to be responsible for my children's morality. I don't want the schools or somebody else dictating what my child's morality is going to be. So that's a big one for me. Parental rights as well. Once the child hits the age of 13, the parents have no right to their sexual history medically at all, zero. And I found that out the hard way when I had to get one of my children tested for something, and I was not privy to any medical information. And I find that very problematic.
Tina Orwell.
Thank you. There's a lot of things our community needs right now. I'm a social worker and mental health professional, and I've been working with our community of how we can expand behavioral health and emergency services to people that are experiencing a mental health or behavioral health crisis. And so we do have a group right now that includes our police chiefs, the director of the King County Behavioral Health, community leaders, and we're just looking at really how can we design a responsive system. Police officers aren't social workers, and they've been put in positions because our mental health system isn't funded enough and it isn't comprehensive enough to meet the needs. So I'm really hoping with the work we're doing and going after some additional funding at the state that we really can create something in South King County that will be responsive. It will address the multiple languages in King County and have peer support, and that really will be responsive to the needs. And we know a lot of people are struggling. A lot of youth are struggling with anxiety and depression. So hopefully this can really help address those needs.
Thank you. Carrie French.
Would you mind repeating the question one more time?
Not at all. What issues exist in your district that you want the legislature to address?
Well, I will just reiterate everything that's been said so far with our two representatives and Ms. Melzer. All of these things are issues that we have to deal with. I would just add to that, we have people that are struggling, businesses that have been closed, people who have lost their jobs, and because of that are behind on their home payments, their mortgages, their rents. And there were some Band-Aids that were put on the problem, but someday you have to pay the piper. And when that happens, or I think we're going to see some foreclosures. And so we need to provide some relief for people, maybe a tax holiday for our small businesses with the B&O tax. I also think that public safety is a huge issue right now. A lot of people are very nervous. I mean, I know a lot of people who won't even go into Seattle because they're scared of turning down the wrong street and being, mobbed or pulled out of their car. So we need to have a safe community. I think that we can discuss our differences without getting violent. So I think tax relief and community public safety is a big thing that we need to address.
All right. Question number 4 here, Tina Orwell. This will be your turn to answer first. What aviation legislation do you plan to introduce during the 2021 session?
Excellent question. Yeah, the airport has such a huge impact on our community, and I've been teaming up with the other legislators, Representative Gregerson and Senator Kaiser in the surrounding areas working on this. One thing is we have a commission that's looking at the siting of another airport, and we will need to expand the timelines on that. Again, we're trying to see if we can expand air capacity in other airports, but also create a new one, a greenfield site, because again, this community has had such a burden of having a major airport in our community. Again, we'll be introducing the legislation to fund the project at the University of Washington around air quality. And that may include things like HEPA filtrations that was brought up earlier, and the HVAC systems and what's needed in the schools. So that's important. I think those are probably our 2 next steps, but I hope at some point, working with our congressional delegation, we can have mitigation both to air noise and air quality, because really we need to look in our homes as far as HEPA filters and other ways to mitigate the pollution. So we got a couple steps, but we have many more to go. Thank you.
After Tina, we have Carrie French, and then it'll be Marlise Melzer, and then Mia Sulein Gregerson. Again, the question is, what aviation legislation do you plan to introduce during the 2021 session?
Well, thank you. With SeaTac being in the 33rd legislative district, it's obviously a huge issue. I hadn't been thinking of aviation legislation But I am very open to whatever the community needs and balance that with what the airport needs, because without the airport, we lose a lot of jobs, and that's a major transportation hub there. So we need to balance what the community needs and what the airport needs. And I am very concerned, as a sufferer of chronic bronchitis, I'm very concerned with air quality as well. I was a volunteer for the American Lung Association when I lived in San Diego when I was in the Navy, and being the volunteer of the year in 2001, I have been worked very closely with the Lung Association. So I would bring in groups like the Lung Association and other groups that have to do with air quality, and talk with all the stakeholders about what their needs are, and so we can come up with good policy for everyone.
And this is Marlisa.
Airport wise, I always thought, well, let me back up. I have lived here in the district for 33 years, actually. And I've always thought that there should be another airport in the state, because for everybody all around the state to come and converge over here is like ridiculous. There should be another one to kind of balance off the state so people can have better access and you don't have as much traffic congestion either. As well, when they, to expand here, that would mean more runways. And I've heard that there's plans for a 4th runway and a 5th runway. And I didn't actually see the documents, but it was somebody who was in a King County position who said that they had seen the documents, that was a plan, that those were planned down the pike. I think that's a horrible idea. Living here, it destroys neighborhoods. The neighborhoods have to be cleaned out. People get displaced. We have more traffic, more pollution, more problems. It's a bad idea to expand SeaTac and not have another airport to service, better service other parts of the state.
Sulein Gregerson.
Well, thank you. I'm going to try to expand a little bit on the airport community and how we need to be thoughtful. And that is, we need a transportation package, and we need to make sure that we continue the full Gateway project. That's the full build out of 509 and 167. We need to make sure that we continue to invest in public health and that we can continue rapid testing if we're going to open up the airport and have more travelers coming through our community. We need to make sure that we're looking for as much federal help as possible when the time comes, so that our hoteliers and our airports and our airlines and all of the other businesses that support our airport community have those resources. I know that cities and counties, the state cannot resource our cities and counties without federal help. So we all need to be in the same place, asking the federal government to help us as we work our way through and out of this pandemic and recession.
We are on to question 5. Marlisa Meltzer, this will be your turn to answer this question first from one of our attendees. And the question is, do you support statewide legislation to mandate police body cameras? So again, that question, do you support statewide legislation to mandate police body cameras?
I actually am of the opinion that that body cameras are a good idea. And I think that if an officer is wearing one, for everybody's protection, the officers as well as and anybody and everybody they're dealing with. So I could try and make it a long answer, but the answer is yes.
Perfect. Yes, you have up to 90 seconds to answer the question. You definitely don't need to take all 90 seconds. Appreciate that. Sulein Gregerson, then we'll go to Tina Orwell and then Carrie French. Again, do you support statewide legislation for police body cameras?
Yeah, I support that. Not only do I support that, but I support independent investigations. I support reviewing arrest records for police officers with misconduct. I support banning no-knock warrants, banning chokeholds or neck restraints. I support the demilitarization of our police force, and I support more resources and helping against implicit bias and anti-racism training, and more procedural justice training. So I think that there's a strong commitment to support all of the above.
Tina Orwell.
Yes, I also support body cameras and appreciate the comments made by my seatmate, Representative Gregerson. In addition, I would say the state does need to help problem solve. I know some of the issues local jurisdictions are facing is what to do with the public disclosure request and the storage of the video. And so again, I think we just need to help them with the tools they need to implement it. In addition, I know as we're talking about police reforms, I am actually partnering with the police chief from Kent and community leaders looking at new officer orientation in communities of color. And so we are working again to see, officers usually a month or two before they go through the formal training, are at the station, and this could provide an opportunity to be in the community, getting to know the community. Many officers don't live where they serve for a number of reasons. And we really think this could be an exciting way to really build the relationship between communities of color and the police. So a lot of work ahead.
So I'm not a huge fan of state mandates really of anything. However, in this case, especially with a lot of the things that have happened in the past, and knowing that police are under a lot of stress and the community is under a lot of stress, I think body cameras are a smart idea to not only protect the citizens of the state and of the district, but also to protect the police officers of unfounded accusations. I think it just protects everyone all around, and I don't think it's a bad idea. So I would support that. And I do support many of the things that Representative Gregerson talked about. But I also want to make sure that we understand that being a police officer is not an easy job, and you deal with a lot of different people that make your life very difficult. And some people are in distress and some people are in crisis. And I know that we don't always act the best when we're in crisis and distress. And I think that if we work together, we can solve a lot of these problems within our communities. Of course, we have to take care of our communities and make sure that the criminals are being prosecuted. And there are some meaningful things that can happen, whether it's restorative or whether it's punitive, but we do need to take a look at that. Thank you.
Next question, we'll direct this back to you, Carrie French. And the question is, again, COVID makes it very difficult for us to communicate with each other, and I'm sure, for you to communicate with your constituents. How will you communicate with your constituents, and on what committees would you like to serve? So question about communication, how will you communicate with your constituents? And then are there committees that you would like to serve on?
Well, I give my phone number out to everybody, and if anyone wants to call me, I answer the phone unless I am either on the phone or in a meeting or something. But I have it up there in the chat if anyone wants to call me. If you want to test it out and see if I'll answer, I will. But I also like what Representative Walsh does in the 19th district. He gets on Facebook and does Facebook Lives, and he gets questions from constituents and he answers their questions. So I'm asking to be your representative. So I think that I should be accessible to you. And, obviously there's some boundaries. I probably don't want a phone call at 2 a.m., although I will probably be up. But if somebody wants to call me, I'm happy to talk with anybody at any time, no matter what your political ideology is or anything else. I'm willing to listen. Oh, and committees. Hadn't really thought about committees. I think that being in the minority, I will probably get the committees I get. So I would be happy to serve in any capacity that the caucus wants me to serve in.
And then we'll go to Tina Orwell, Mia Sulein Gregerson, and then Marlisa Meltzer again. How will you communicate with your constituents, and what committees would you like to serve on?
Great question. Being available is incredibly important, being transparent and available. So I do a lot of communication email. I've been doing more by Zoom, which is interesting and wonderful. It's not as good as meeting people for coffee. I hope in the future we can start doing that again. But again, I also provide my phone number. But you know, I think teaming up with constituents is important. I usually introduce 1 or 2 bills every session that were brought by constituents. This last year, we have a lot of leaders in the deaf and hard of hearing community, and we teamed up and with Karen, and we passed a bill to add a symbol on driver's license. It's voluntary, but would tell a police officer or first responder if the person's deaf or hard of hearing. So again, I think it's really important because it's great ideas. It helps me know what to put on and get my marching orders. So we want to continue to be available. Thank you.
Thank you.
Committees, I forgot that too. I've been serving on public safety. A lot of the work I do is like testing of the sexual assault kits and protecting and survivors is really important to me, trafficking of children. So a lot of the issues on public safety are a priority, judiciary, and then, you know, I have to see what other committees are available, but those are probably my top 2.
So my committees, I'm the chair of state government tribal relations, and in there we deal with the redistricting and elections, a lot of outreach, getting reports from agencies. It'll be overseeing the implementation of the Office of Equity. And so we're very busy in that space. And the other committee I'm on is labor and workplace standards, which deals with unemployment, LNI, workers' rights, business, and making sure that our labor allies, labor friends. So a lot of work there. And then the last is I'm on the appropriations committee, which is the budget committee. And when I think about how I'm going to continue to outreach to constituents is really to try to be connected to communities where they are, whether it's through trusted messengers, through community-based organizations, whether it's small or large, elected leaders, faith leaders, listening sessions. My seatmates and I, we do several tele-town halls, and when we can, we do in-person meetings, coffees, town halls, and of course, social media and the internet. But again, our community is very disenfranchised and spread out. And so we have to be really creative in making sure we have repetitive, thoughtful engagement. Thank you.
Okay, so like Carrie, you know, being a newbie, kind of you get whatever you get, I imagine. What would particularly interest me would be education, community health, and public safety. Communicating with constituents, well, Facebook Live and forums. I mean, that's kind of the thing to do now, right? I will also make sure that whatever information, whatever things are being discussed and passed in the legislature are public knowledge. I will make sure that no meetings are held behind closed doors in the middle of the night when people sometimes do things that are not quite transparent. I think transparency is something that's been lacking here and there, and something that's very incredibly important.
Thank you. It is now time for closing statements. We are going to go first to Tina Orwell, then Carrie French, then Marlisa Meltzer, and then Mia Sulein Gregerson. Just a reminder, 2 minutes for your closing statements, Ms. Orwell.
Great, thank you. And thank you for holding this forum. You know, it is an honor to serve our community, and I know we've got some tough roads ahead. It's a stressful time, but I do really believe that these partnerships, that we can get through it together and we can build something better. There's been a lot of important issues raised today. You know, when I first started in the Great Recession, you know, I helped bring a group of folks together on foreclosure prevention, and we provide counseling and mediation services. You know, those are the kinds of things we need to expand now, because we have struggling families. Mental health and behavioral health, suicide prevention, which I've worked on over the years. You know, we really got to create a robust system that can really meet the needs of our community. supporting small businesses. I know at the foreclosure hotline last month, the #1 profession calling in were small business owners. We need to provide them relief and support so that they can get through this tough time. So again, I feel, though it's tough, I feel hopeful because I do know that when we all work together that we can get things done and really build something better. So love your support. Thank you.
Ms. French.
Hi, well, thank you for this opportunity to be here and talk with everyone. There are so many great things that have been said already, and I too agree with many things that Representative Orwell said. I would love to win, lose, or draw. I'd love to work with her in the future on some of these things, and I probably will be calling you. And but I did run to give people a choice, and so although we do agree on a lot of things, we do disagree on some things. And I did want to make sure that parents in the 33rd district know that they are the parents, not the state. And so want to make sure that parents have the rights to raise their children the way they see fit. And obviously, if there's abuse, we have to step in. But generally, parents need to parent their children and not the state. I also want to make sure that veteran suicide is addressed because apparently that's going up, and I am a veteran. So a lot of things that we need to take care of. We do have tough times ahead, but I do believe that, like in any family, it's dealing with catastrophic events. You tighten your belt and you figure out how to work it. And we are Washingtonians, and we can get through a lot. And we've been through a lot, and I know that we're going to get through even stronger. So thank you. I would appreciate your vote. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I don't remember if it was me or Mia who was going to go next.
Oh no, it's your turn to go first. And closing statement, you have 2 minutes.
Okay. So this November, we have an opportunity to do some things differently. We have an opportunity to place the power back into the hands of the people. If you honor me with your vote, I promise I will never support mandatory vaccinations. I will never vote in favor of frivolous taxes or unnecessary programs. I will never vote to sexualize or otherwise exploit our children. I will never vote in favor of tolls on the roads that we have already paid for. I will vote on anything to open Washington state. I will vote to abolish unnecessary and frivolous programs. I will support our First and Second Amendment rights and all the rest of them. I will vote in favor of school choice and parental rights. I will support lawfulness and public safety in our communities. So I'm asking for your vote. Marlisa Melzer for State Rep, Position 2, 33rd Legislative District. Thank you for your time.
Well, I want to say thank you for the past support, and I really love your support going into this election. My door will always be open. I believe in the complicated truth, and I will do whatever it takes to help work and educate to close the gap on whatever those truths are. I think a perfect example is a comprehensive sexual health bill that we passed this year. That legislation actually gives parents more rights. It gives school districts and school boards more rights. It actually is more relevant to age-appropriate education that's been well studied and scientific. It will help protect our children at younger ages to know what is right and what is wrong. And I think that so many children, especially of color, struggle with having those resources and those tools. I believe that we can really take this time that's a struggle, as my seatmate talked about, and really look for some moments of opportunity and statewide solutions, whether it's the way we create databases, and we know that we're all taking surveys, and when only 60% of the school districts respond in a survey, what do we do about the 40% that don't? I think this is the moment in time that we really work hard to ensure that we're closing that gap, and we do the work and very intentionally. Again, as I said earlier, centering racial equity. There's no other district that would be the most supported by doing anti-racist work. We talked a little bit about police reform, and I agree that it's going to take a lot of us with very diverse backgrounds to come together to ensure that we're doing the best we can and support the officers in the places they are. But again, we can't have people afraid that the police will unduly harm our children and We need to close the gap on the rhetoric around cities being safe or unsafe. We know that Tukwila at one point in time was said to be the most unsafe city in the entire nation. That's absolutely just not true. So we need to really continue to use our areas of science-driven data to be able to get the right message out that these places are safe and that we're doing a really good job. So thank you again.
Thank you all so much. Thank you to the candidates for your time this evening. We know how busy it is to run a campaign, and especially during a pandemic, you know, it's a challenge. So appreciate you making the time to be with us this evening. Thank you to everyone who joined us today, who watched and submitted your questions. We really appreciate your engagement. Your ballots should be arriving any day now. Please remember to vote. And I think we have a poll that we can go ahead and launch. There it is. So did tonight's candidate forum help you to make you a more informed voter? If you would go ahead and participate in that poll, we would appreciate it. Again, thank you so much to the committee sponsors, South King Media, Highline Times, the Seattle Southside Chamber of Commerce, the League of Women Voters, and the King County Library System. Again, thank you so much for being here. Remember, vote. Appreciate it. And if you're staying for the 11th, stay on. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here this evening. My name is Andrea Ray, and on behalf of the full organizing committee of this candidate forum for the 11th Legislative District, it is my honor to welcome you all here tonight and to serve as your moderator and facilitator. For those of you who joined us last hour for the 33rd forum, this will be a little bit of a repeat the next 4 minutes or so. So if you need a break and want to go grab a glass of water, go ahead and do that at this time. Thank you all that made this event possible: the Highline Times, South King Media, the King County Library System, the League of Women Voters, and of course, retired Burien City Council member Rose Clark, who serves as our committee chair. Now I'm just going to take a brief minute and just discuss how this forum will be conducted. Again, we're here this evening to learn more about our candidates for the State House of Representatives for the 11th District. Running for Legislative District 11, State Representative Position 1 are David Hackney and Zach Hudgens. And for position 2, Steve Berquist and Sean Atchison. Unfortunately, Steve Berquist, we knew, had a prior conflict that couldn't make it here tonight, and he sends his regrets. Sean Atchison, we are expecting him, and so if he maybe comes in later, we will just fold him in as we're going along. So thank you so much, candidates, for being here with us. We appreciate you taking the time. You will have an opportunity to introduce yourself directly to our attendees when we do our 2 minutes for opening statements. We will start with position 1 and just go in alphabetical order. We will then transition to the Q&A. Again, as Vicki said, please do type your questions into the chat directed towards Q&A for candidates. That's the best way to ensure that we can see them and rotate through as many questions as we are able to. We hope to get to 8 or so questions this evening. We'll see how time allows. Each candidate will have up to 90 seconds to respond to each question, and we'll just go back and forth, taking turns who answers each question first. Again, candidates are only to speak when it's their time to speak. They're able to unmute and mute themselves. And time enforcement will be adhered to out of an abundance of fairness. And Ken Robinson is here with the Highline Times. Ken, if you want to give a wave, just show you will keep time on your phone. And so you will show it up to the screen when we are getting close to time being out. And then we'll just ask that if you're in the middle of a sentence, you just finish up your sentence and wrap up quickly. Once we get to about 7:50 or so, we will go ahead and do the closing statement. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to deliver a closing statement, and we will conclude. Again, candidates, just a quick and hopefully unnecessary reminder to please respect our culture of kindness and inclusion. Please do not address each other. Please address the attendees and the viewers that we have watching, and any behavior that is disrespectful or disruptive will not be tolerated. And so without further ado, I think we can go ahead and get started with opening statements. Again, we will start in alphabetical order. David Hackney, the floor is yours. 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you very much. So my name is David Hackney, and I'm running for state representative in the 11th District, Position 1. I'm running because representation matters. I'm running because Black lives matter, and I'm running because Black legislators matter. I've been an attorney for over 25 years, but I think my personal story will tell you more about the kind of legislator I'll be. I come from a proud union family. Both my grandfathers were union men. One grandfather survived the Great Depression, and the other escaped the Jim Crow South because United Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters and United Auto Workers were fighting for their economic and civil rights. I'm going to fight to strengthen collective bargaining and to address income inequality. When I started high school, guidance counselors told my family that I was not college material. But with the love and support of my family and investments from my community, I was able to obtain degrees from Cornell University and Harvard Law School. I'm going to fight the educational needs of every student in the 11th District so they can reach their full potential. In high school, my best friend was shot to death by another teenager who should have never had access to a firearm. I believe gun violence is preventable, and in Olympia, I'm going to fight for responsible gun laws. And finally, my senior year of college, my mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer at a time my family did not have health insurance. The subsequent medical bills crippled my family financially. I'm going to fight for health care for all so that everyone in this state has a health care safety net. In this community, I've been a volunteer at Tabor 100 on their board as their lead advocate for I-1000. I am on the currently serve on the board of the Alliance for Gun Responsibility, where I advocated for I-1639 and the implementation of 940. And I've been appointed by the governor to the Washington State's Human Rights Commission, where I hear employment and housing cases once a month. And finally, I serve on the board of the Tequila Children's Foundation, where we advocate for the needs of children. And I'm going to bring those issues to Olympia to fight for the people of the 11th District.
Zach Hudgens.
Hello, thank you for this opportunity to join you tonight. I find that one of the best ways to make our community better is through the election process. And as we sit here in Martin Luther King Jr. County, we should be reminded and inspired by his work for the Voting Rights Act of 1965 to bring more participation into our government, because voting matters. As the chair of the State Government Committee, I ushered through the largest package of reform bills in the nation that broke down barriers, opened transparency, and created fairness in our system. We now have same-day voter registration in our state, so anyone can go in and register to vote until 8 p.m. on Election Day. We now have 16 and 17-year-old pre-registration to get young people ready to vote. And we passed the Washington State Voting Rights Act because voting is under attack at the federal level, and we had some problems here in Washington State also. In the city of Yakima, Latinx candidates couldn't get elected because of their districting system, and the Washington Voting Rights Act changed that. People like Dulce Gutierrez were able to get elected because of that law change. I even went to Baghdad during the war to help them get ready with their first elections because I believe voting matters so much. This is in stark contrast to my opponent, who has only voted in the 11th District one time in his entire life. That's it, one time. My service in Olympia is centered on our communities and breaking down barriers, creating opportunity, and fighting for fairness. The endorsements of my re-election effort are a reflection of my work and values in Olympia. African-American leaders like Ed Prince from Renton, Deshaun Quinn from the Tukwila City Council, African-American legislators like Eric Pettigrew, John Lovick, Deborah Intiman had a choice in this race, and they endorsed my campaign because they know me and my work. I've consistently solved problems and stood up against powerful interests. This includes fighting for reform for our justice system, expanding our democracy, passing paid family leave, and our pay equity in our state. I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. Really appreciate that. Again, just a reminder for our attendees that you can ask your questions to the candidates. You just need to type them into the chat. Go ahead and put that into Q&A for candidates in the chat, and appreciate those questions that are coming through right now. So first question, and we'll start with you, Zach, because you were last with the opening statements. So you'll be first for question number 1, and then we will again just go back and forth, 90 seconds. First question is, the 11th district takes in 4 incorporated towns, including Seattle. How will you fairly represent each individual community where the needs and problems may be widely variant?
Well, thank you for the question. It is an odd district. It's got parts of Seattle all the way up on Beacon Hill and all the way down to Fairwood and Renton. Most of Tukwila, most of Renton, parts of unincorporated King County, parts of Kent. And I'll tell you, I will continue to do what I've been doing, which is fighting for justice and equity and fair representation across the district. This is how we got funding for the Hat and Boots Park in Seattle. This is how we got funding for the parks at Sunset Park up in Renton. This is how we got housing money for El Centro de la Raza and at Seymour in South Park. This is how we got money out towards Kent for YMCA, or the money for the Health Point Health Clinic in Tukwila for $1 million. So what it's about is recognizing and being tuned into the community, being rooted in the community, and knowing what their needs are, listening to local officials, and listening to local voices. It's about being out in the high schools. It's about talking to teachers in the grade schools. It's about meeting with the chambers of commerce, at the Rotary meetings, hearing what people are saying at the scouting meetings, and then trying to reflect that as best we can in Olympia to bring home what they need, whether it's a health clinic, whether it's housing, whether it's a park. And I think I've done a great job of that, of partnering with local jurisdictions at the city and the county, for Grandmother's Hill in Tukwila, again, for the Mini Mart Park in Georgetown, for Jean Coulon Park improvements in Renton, all of those things. That's how you do it, is by listening to locals and then making sure you're bringing home what they need. Thank you.
Hackney.
Thank you very much for that question. I think there's a lot of issues that are common to the communities. The 11th district lies in South King County. It has a lower average median income than the rest of the county. It experienced 77% of all the gun violence in King County in 2019 was South King County. And it is a majority renters district. So one, I believe I'm going to address issues that impact vulnerable communities in all of these cities. I'm going to fight for protections for renters in a majority renters district. I'm going to fight to restore affirmative action to the state of Washington to a majority minority district. And I'm going to fight for responsible gun laws in a community that's been devastated by gun violence. I think we need a representative that is going to be working year round to organize the 11th district on critical issues. You know, we lost the opportunity for affirmative action in the state of Washington by 0.5%. We have some of the lowest voter turnout in the state. We have some of the lowest participation of PCOs. We need someone to organize the district on critical issues that impact vulnerable communities in all of the municipalities in the 11th district. And I think that given the opportunity, I am going to work to communicate how critical these issues are and the role that the community can play to improve them. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, Mr. Hackney, you will go first on this one. Again, we'll just continue to go back and forth. What is your record or plan for combating climate change?
Thank you very much. So, I have spent 5 years as an attorney with the Nature Conservancy and was able to learn firsthand the impact of climate change around the world and just how devastating it is. My plan is to support clean energy in the state of Washington. One, we recognize that cars and trucks are the largest contributor of carbon that impacts climate change. And we're going to have to work to get people out of cars and to look for alternative means of transportation. So for trucks, that could be electric vehicles, again, the clean fuel standard, expanding transportation, mass transportation, making sure that we have low income housing near mass transportation. ST3 went right through South King County and avoided the 11th district as if it were had landmines. If I'm in Olympia, I'm going to make sure that the transportation bills definitely address the people of the 11th district, because it starts here, but it starts with a statewide program, again, to transition to a green economy, to make sure workers are protected in doing so, and to deal with our transportation issues by getting people out of cars and into alternative means of transportation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea, for the question about climate change. This is an issue that we are seeing with the forest fire smoke, with health disparities in places like South Park. We've got asthma rates that are off the charts that we really need to deal with, because our communities are going to be impacted more and more. I'll tell you, I've got a great record on climate change legislation. I'm on the record for voting for the clean fuel standards. And we send a letter over to the Senate telling them that they're not going to get a transportation package unless they include a clean fuel standards, because we've done a lot. We've got a lot of great clean energy in Washington State. Most of it's hydro. I've fought for years to protect Initiative 937, which is about diversifying our energy source. That's why I was the legislator of the year for the Washington Conservation Voters for that work of diversifying our energy portfolio. And then we're going to encourage businesses, a partnership. We've got IKEA has the largest solar array over on 180th. And so we're going to encourage businesses to do that as well. I've been a big supporter of the Energy Freedom Fund in the past, which encourages biofuels. I helped set up the Autonomous Vehicle Task Force. That is one way of changing our multimodal system. And then helped expand 405 in the carpool lanes and the HOV lanes to make sure we can encourage, as we grow, more people per car, and that we encourage people to be counted as vehicles, as individuals being moved through corridors and not just vehicles. So this is a core value that I have, and I've got a great record on it. Thank you very much.
All right, this question, Mr. Hudgens, you'll be up first again. So again, this is, as a state, we are still working to implement McCleary. COVID-19 must have had a severe impact on our budget. Should we expect education budget cuts?
I'm sorry, should we expect what? I'm sorry?
Education budget cuts.
Well, I don't think so. I'll tell you, I've got a 4th grade kid in the local public schools. He just actually came in the room right now. That's part of why I couldn't hear you. And I'll tell you that, oh, there he is right there. That McCleary was a huge issue in our state. It took a lot of effort, but we got $13 billion of new money into our educational system. Now, there's still a lot to be done. We've got huge issues around equity. We've got huge issues around special education and huge issues around transportation as well. So I think with the McCleary ruling, we're not going to have education cuts. And that's about, I think, a lot of what this campaign is about, is who is going to be prepared, who is going to be able to defend the community from any budget cuts that do come. And I'd say that after many years on the Appropriations Committee, I'm in the room where it happens, as they say in Hamilton. I'm in the room where these decisions are going to be made to defend the community, as I've fought for all of that in the past. And so education is close to my heart. It's very something that I get held accountable for as I talk to teachers, as I talk to principals. And this is why I've been endorsed by the Washington Education Association, by the American Federation of Teachers, why they're helping out on the campaign, by public school employees, is because I've committed to making sure that we properly fund education, we close our education opportunity gap, and that we continue to make sure that we maximize our learning assistance program funding while recognizing special education and transportation are not solved in McCleary.
Thank you. So once again, I will say now, I will not vote to cut education as a means of addressing this economic crisis that we're in. So yes, McCleary requires the state to fund, K through 12, but I also think it's important that we continue to invest in pre-K and also with our community college, university, and also apprentice programs, pre-apprenticeship programs for skilled trades. So when you cut during an economic crisis like this, you can often cause more harm than good. You can make the problem worse. That happened in 2009, and we can't let it happen again. University of Washington study showed that when you increase foster care from 18 to 21, you save $6 for every you spend. You need to be able to make smart investments. So during this crisis of pandemic, we need PPEs, personal protective equipment. We also need proud progressive Democrats to stand up against Republicans and also fearful Democrats, incremental Democrats who are not for systemic change, and make sure that we change. If that requires new funding sources, progressive taxes for wealthy individuals, both income and capital gains, then so be it. No cuts to education.
Perfect, thank you. Again, just a reminder to all of our attendees that you can ask the candidates questions yourself directly by just typing in the Q&A for candidate section so that we can get to those. Another question that's coming from one of our attendees addresses equity. And again, the question is, equity is an issue on many fronts. Can you please offer examples of what you have done to forward gender equity?
Okay, thank you for that. I have been, like I said, a lead advocate for I-1000, restoring affirmative action to the state of Washington, which also includes gender as well as racial groups that have been traditionally not included in things like education, jobs, and more importantly, public contracts by the state. I believe that when you don't have equity anywhere, you don't really have it, you don't have it at all. And so I am not just a advocate, for Black Lives Matter. I'm an advocate for equity in all areas of our society. When we don't treat people with respect, when we don't give people the same opportunities, it actually hurts us. It hurts our economy. It hurts the social fabric that we live in, and causes more problems and division. We need to find ways to unify and bring people together so that we can tackle these very difficult issues we have, like climate change, like systemic racism, like police brutality and mass incarceration. So in every area where I am acting as a legislator and a policymaker, I'm going to be looking for equity for all groups that have been marginalized. And again, this kind of focus should have been a long time ago. These are not new issues. Thank you.
Go. Issues of gender equity have been very close to my heart, my family, for many, many years. My mother was one of the first subscribers to Ms. Magazine. And in college, I was actually a co-commissioner of women's concerns to bring speakers like Ellie Smeal to our campus to talk about issues that were confronting our community. I've been on the forefront of fighting for choice for many, many years as well. In the legislature, we passed the Women's Commission, which is the first organization focused specifically on women's issues within the state. It is sitting in parallel with our other commissions on LGBTQ and African-American affairs, Asian Pacific affairs, and Hispanic affairs as well. We also passed the Office of Equity at the state as well, to look internally. So the commissions look externally at issues of equity, and we're going to look internally into state government around equity, pay issues, promotion issues, to make sure that our state is functioning better. I'll also tell you that we passed the Opportunity Pay Gap Act, which is sort of like the Lilly Ledbetter of Washington State, as well as the paid family leave and paid sick time, which both benefit women disproportionately. Now, I'll agree with David that equity is across the board. I believe that a rising tide lifts all ships. And so we need to make sure that we are applying an equity lens across the board, but I do have a strong record on gender equity as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hudgens. And this question will be directed at you first. Could you please prioritize what your three priority issues are for the legislative session? For example, homelessness, effect on businesses from COVID-19, etc. What are your top three priorities, and how will you work at the legislature to make some solutions on those priorities?
Well, I'll tell you that I've got a great record of solving big, complex problems. Our breakfast after the bell was a systemic change in how we feed kids across the state. Tens of thousands of kids are fed breakfast now every single day because we passed that bill and the food policy package that folks like Representative Gregerson and Representative Riccelli helped with as well. So that we don't have food shaming, so that we're paying lunch co-pays. It's systemic change. The same with our democracy package that we put forward that I mentioned earlier. I'll tell you, my top 3 priorities are probably going to be in line with what the legislature is dealing with, which is dealing with police accountability, dealing with the budget shortfall, and dealing with COVID. Personally, my committee is also going to be dealing with protecting individual privacy from big tech. I've also got the Washington State Civil Rights Trail that is very important to me that was introduced last year. I've been working on for 3 years, and that's I'll move forward as well. So those are the top priorities that I'll be dealing with. My experience also is that you never know what else is coming down the line for session, and we'll have to deal with that when we get there. But COVID, the budget, and police accountability are the top 3 that we'll be tackling. Thank you.
Hackney.
Thank you. So I think, you know, we are in a crisis right now. And so that has to dominate whatever your interest or hobbies may be. Now we have to focus on stimulating the economy, saving small businesses, extending unemployment to folks, and including gig workers, subsidizing childcare, saving, like I said, you know, we're losing thousands of restaurants. So everything is going to be focused on that. We have to focus on continuing our eviction and foreclosure moratorium. And we have to figure out some way to retire that debt, because at the end of the moratorium, folks are going to be stuck with bills they can never pay. So people are out of work, people are struggling, and it is the number one priority is dealing with how to address stimulating the economy in those areas because of the pandemic, making sure that we either find new sources of revenue or creative ways not to cut essential social services and not cut areas where it will decrease demand in the economy. The economy grows when working Washingtonians have more earning and spending power. Businesses have to make capital expenditure and hire more workers. We need to focus on that. When the government stops capital projects, when the government stops stimulating the economy goes into a death spiral and the recession is longer and worse. So I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen.
Hackney. And you get to respond to this question first. So we all experienced the negative impacts of the wildfires from California a few weeks ago. What can Washington, and maybe even more specifically the legislature, do to effectively respond to smoke coming from California?
Thank you for that. So obviously the state legislature does not have a lot of sway in California, but we can do our part in making sure that we are doing everything we can to protect our natural resources from fire, and that we're doing everything we can to clean up the air. I think, when issues that happen multi-state, we need to be looking to the federal government for assistance. But obviously we can't pass legislation in the state of Washington to require California to do anything different. I think it behooves us to maybe offer resources to California, because their issues in other states and surrounding states, when they have forest fires, have a significant impact on our air quality as well. So I think what we can do is potentially assist them in both, preventing forest fires as well as, taking them out. I used to work at the Nature Conservancy, and there's a whole group there that does, professional burns that are necessary, right, to maintain a healthy natural resources and prevent fires from getting out of control. So I think providing more resources to help them and to make sure that we're doing everything in our power to make sure that our air is clean is the best we can do.
I think this question actually is about 3 different things. The first is about climate change. We need to do something about climate change in Washington State. We talked a little bit about it, clean fuel standards. We need to manage our forests well. It's a word that I learned after getting elected. It's called silviculture, which is when you manage a forest well. It's about helping to make sure that our forests are healthy, that we're fighting disease, we're removing diseased trees and fuel, and some of that costs money. We're spending over $100 million in bad years on fighting fires here in Washington State. If we can do it here in Washington State, other states can do it as well. The second thing is that it's about disparities and it's about health access. We need universal health care in our state. We took a step towards that with the first public option in the country, and I support that we need to do more of. We already cover veterans, we cover kids with Apple Health, we cover seniors, we cover poor folks, but we need to expand the exchange, and we need to expand the public option so that people who are encountering health issues, like we see the disparities in our district, have access to healthcare. The final thing is we need to do some more action around monitoring. We got funding for an air monitoring station on Beacon Hill in Jefferson Park. It's the one that's always featured right over by where the lawn bowling club used to be up there in Beacon Hill, by the driving range, where the new topped water facilities were. And those kind of air monitoring facilities can be put all over the place, including near the airport, because we see those health discrepancies all over the district. Thanks.
Much, Representative Hutchins. Next question, you get the first shot at. And the question is, campaigning and certainly communication with constituents looks much different in the era of COVID. Knocking on doors and having that direct one-on-one communication looks different. How are you reaching out to your constituents? And when you are reaching out to them, what are some of the top questions that they're asking you, and how are you responding? So kind of a three-part question. How are you communicating? And then when you are communicating, what is the nature of that communication?
Well, I'll tell you, this year has been like no other I've ever seen in my time in the legislature representing the communities. For 6 months, we couldn't go outside. We couldn't talk to voters. We couldn't knock on doors. I've done that every single year, knocked on doors on Beacon Hill, on Orcas Avenue, down in Fairwood, in Cascade neighborhood, here in Tukwila, in Allentown, all over the place. And that's the best way that you can consistently, over time, hear from voters. Then you go out to the Renton River days and Kent Cornucopia days, places I've never seen my opponent because he's only voted in the district one time. You go to the clam lights lighting, you go to the movie nights in Burien or in Renton. And all of those things are where you get input from folks. So I'll tell you that it's a lot of time on the phone. It's a lot of time on Zoom with constituents. We have done some knocking on doors with masks. We've been following some national guidelines down in the Fairwood neighborhood. And then you just spend a lot of time on the phone, I guess, is the most of it. And what I've been hearing about is that people are worried about the economy. They're worried about childcare. I support universal childcare. I support better broadband. I think both of those things are going to be issues that pay dividends now and into the future. We're seeing that with education now, that we've got real impact in our communities because of COVID. They're worried about the economy, broadband, childcare, and then they're worried about being stuck at home a little bit. So those are the top issues that I'm hearing about.
Mr. Hackney.
Sure, thank you for that. So yes, definitely the methods of communication. I've done multiple Zoom. I can't tell you how many Zoom meetings I've had to talk about issues of concern to the community. I've also been with my team. We've been lit dropping with masks and dropping literature on the front porches of folks, but without engaging them and communicating with them. We've also obviously, using the mail as well. So the issues that, as Representative Hutchins mentioned, the economy. People are very concerned about how we are going to address these economic issues. And I will say that, COVID-19 has shown a spotlight on cracks in our system that have been existing for a long time and should have been addressed earlier. Things like lack of universal health care or a safety net for folks. Things like, inequality or inequity with education. So we see that now, with respect to broadband, but that's, again, those issues have been around for a long time. So folks are focused on what we're going to do next to improve their lives and actually solve problems for them. Our job is to solve problems, not to just check off things and say that they're completed when they're not, and not to take credit for other people's work, but to stand in there and fight for the people of the 11th District.
This is your question first now. What is your experience working with families with disabilities, and what would you do as an elected official to help families with disabilities?
Thanks for that question. You know, I'm fortunate enough not to have experienced that in my personal life, but I have been a community activist my whole life. You know, I started a community kitchen that served 2,000 meals a month to the homeless people in Washington, D.C. And I have, again, like I said, I'm an advocate for equity and equality for every community. So, you know, families with children with disabilities, the issues that are that need to be addressed most is special education. So that's one of the issues that McCleary did not resolve, and we are woefully behind in providing special education resources to disabled children. And it's a huge problem that should have been, again, addressed a long time ago. And if given an opportunity in Olympia, I will not leave any vulnerable member of the community behind. We need to start thinking about how we can have initiatives and programs that are inclusive. When more people are involved and getting their problem solved, it obviously impacts the economy, impacts the community in a positive way. And so as your representative, that's going to be my focus, is to understand the issues for the most vulnerable in our society and make sure that their needs are taken care of.
Mr. Hackney. Mr. Hudgens.
Thank you very much. This is an issue that is very close to my heart for a couple of reasons. One is that when I was first elected, Senator Margarita Prentice opened up some of the doors of how the legislature works around issues. Her son has autism, and made sure that I knew about how the funding worked for families. We needed to make sure that we had a Medicaid waiver. We needed to expand the number of slots and the opportunities. We needed to make sure that we were funding employment opportunities for all of these folks. We needed to make sure that we regulated and created more spots for community living as well. Folks like Margaret Thompson would organize the Arc of Washington in the 11th District every year. And it was in Doubletree. Families would come out and tell us their stories. We would meet folks. Advocates like Audrey Adams brought her son Kyle to the legislature for many years as well. It's also personal because my cousin has a son who is developmentally disabled. And it's important that we don't take advantage of them, that we don't prosecute them, that we make sure that they have the same opportunities as everyone else. And that's what it's about. It's about making sure that the money is there, that we're listening to them, that we humanize them, and that we make sure that they can have great lives. Billy Prentice, for example, has been working for many years, and it's good to see him at Renton River Days now and then. But these are the important things, is to make sure that the money is there, that we protect that part of the budget. That has been a priority of mine, both professionally and personally, for many years.
All right, so you get the first crack at this next question, Mr. Hudgens. And this question has to do with funding for nonprofits. So there have been, grant programs and other, funding available for, for-profit businesses, but many, nonprofits, especially in the creative arts, are really suffering from the ravages of COVID-19. How would you, as an elected official at the state level, help nonprofits?
Well, I'll tell you that the creative arts are close to my heart for a couple of reasons. One is I was on the State Arts Commission for many years. I got to meet artists all over the state. I got to watch how the arts created jobs across the state. There's actually a national metric called the Creative Vitality Index that measures jobs created by arts and the arts community. And it was a wonderful opportunity to see all of the vibrant differences that we have in our communities, whether it's a small sort of the Renton Historical Museum, or whether it's the Highline Historical Society over in Burien. Each of these generates jobs and community pride, and we need to protect those. I will say that it's going to be difficult during the economic recession to fund everything at the same level. We're not going to be able to backfill federal dollars. We're not going to be able to backfill all of the state dollars. But we do need to protect the things that create jobs, that create community pride, that really drive things forward. So there's going to be more partnerships. There's going to be more shrinking, I think, of some of these grants. But our goal is often to keep the programs in place and to spread the peanut butter just a little bit thinner, but to make sure that things are there. I'm also on the board of the State Historical Society. They've got a nonprofit side as well that reaches out to schools across the state for their programming. They slim down the programming. So there are ways of making sure the grants are still there. We protect the programs, we protect the values. We just don't have as much money to do it all. Thank you.
Hackney.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I mean, there's no question that public funding of the arts is important and should be continued as best we can. However, during this pandemic crisis, we are going to have to prioritize. And the priority is going to have to be for things that are critical for folks to live. You know, we have to make sure that people are fed, housed, have health care. And that doesn't mean that, again, that we need to eliminate the, lost my light here, that we need to eliminate the protections for, you know, those communities, but we are going to have to, again, prioritize. I think like other organizations where, you know, we've had stimulus to make sure, you know, that people have jobs. Again, having people work is how the economy is going to grow. So before these businesses close or lay off, we need to have stimulus packages that address those organizations like other organizations so that we can keep our economy vital. And so I will totally support that, but I'm going to be honest. You know, the priority is going to be on more of the critical needs of people in the community without eliminating funding for the arts. Thank you.
Mr. Hackney, go ahead and take a little breath there while I look through our questions here to find the next one you will get to answer first. And again, just a reminder, we have about 7 minutes left for Q&A. So if you haven't typed in your question yet, we might still have an opportunity to get to that. So again, just go ahead and chat Q&A to candidates. This next question has to do with just how you prioritize your communication, you know, with your constituents. Would you say that you use a squeaky wheel gets the grease approach, or what other metric or modeling system, you know, would you use when you are prioritizing your communication or your work at the legislature with your constituents?
Thanks for that. You know, I don't believe that it's the constituents' obligation to make noise for me to pay attention. I think the better approach is to have a communication strategy where I am interacting with representatives, particularly from vulnerable communities, community groups, associations. Like I'm you know, a member of Tabor 100, so, you know, which is a group that is focused on minority and small-owned businesses. You know, my work with the Alliance for Gun Responsibility, with working with communities to prevent gun violence, and my work with the Tukwila Children's Foundation, again. But I think I need to obviously expand as a representative. I need to make sure that I'm communicating in ways where the people are. I will have a social media presence, not just during campaign time, all year long. I'm not going to send out a newsletter like it's 1978, because that's not where people are. I'm going to be on Twitter. I'm going to be on Instagram. I'm going to be on Facebook. I'm going to be organizing the district on issues that are critical. So it's not that the community is going to be making noise for me to pay attention. I'm going to make a noise so the community can pay attention. We need to focus them on the statewide, countywide, citywide candidates and issues that impact their lives. We haven't had any organization and any focus on actually solving problems. And that's what I'm going to bring to Olympia.
Senator Hutchins.
Thank you very much. You know, the constituent stuff is really great. I hear so many great ideas from folks. Sometimes it's the squeaky wheel. I can tell you just a couple of weeks ago, I heard from a fitness business owner that was worried about the new rules coming around how to reopen from the governor's office. I was able to put that person in touch with the governor's office that actually made the rules. That's the role of the representatives, make government work better. It's also, if you listen closely, it's how you can solve some big problems. I had a bill that recognized the first Latino in state law. Cesar Chavez's birthday is now recognized statewide. The next year we did Dolores Huerta, two giants of the Latino community. And that idea came from a kid that I was telling about the DREAM Act. And he says, why don't we have this? And I said, that's a great idea. Let's go do that. It took 5 years, but we got that into place. The DREAM Act came from listening to constituents that had access to in-state tuition, but didn't have access to financial aid, and we're having trouble with that. And so you can solve big problems by listening to your constituents or by talking to folks, for example, in the school districts. United Way of King County was pushing out programs around breakfast after the bell. I had worked at United Way of King County for a little while as a loaned executive. And so we talked about which programs were working. Tukwila was piloting the program. So was Auburn, a few other schools, East Wenatchee. That's how we pushed it out statewide so that kids across the state can get access to breakfast after the bell. I also try and answer every single email that comes in if they've got a snail mail address. And that's what you got to do, is pay attention and listen to the constituents.
Much. I think we have time for 2 more questions here. So 2 more questions. First, Representative Hudgens, you will go first. There is a lot of talk about Black Lives Matter in this election, but in the 11th, of course, is an incredibly diverse community beyond Black and white. What programs do you support and will you support that connects and unites and lifts up all neighborhoods and all ethnicities?
You know, this is a core value that I have. I can point to my first legislative session where I got passed the law that requires the little pictures at every single Sound Transit stop. So you can navigate the Sound Transit system if you don't speak English or read or write Latin letters. If you only speak Chinese or Japanese or Greek or Ukrainian, you can get around on Sound Transit. These are core values that I've brought through my entire legislative career, whether it's about making sure that all undocumented kids have access to financial aid. That's largely Latino in our state, but it's about 30% Asia Pacific Islanders as well. About the Workforce Investment Act, which is going to provide financial aid for students to go to college. It'll be free college under $50,000 and a sliding scale up to $90,000. Half of that money is going to go to communities of color and students of color. It's about having an equity lens on everything that you do, and so that folks that come in front of my committee are diverse, from the Japanese American Citizens League to CARE to Black Lives Matter. That's why we passed out a moratorium on the use of facial recognition software in my committee for 3 years, pushing back against big tech, taking those stands. Sometimes you don't think tech can have a racial or an equity lens, but it can, and we've applied it in our committee many, many times. So those are a few of the issues that I can point to, that I will continue to point to and continue to work on in my time in the legislature.
Hackney.
Yeah, I don't think Black Lives Matter is a call just for African Americans. Black Lives Matter is a call to action to disassemble institutional racism that impacts minorities, women, the LGBTQ community, the transgender community, immigrants. We all need to work together as one. We've been divided by Republicans and by conservatives, and we need to come together and recognize that when we fight for affirmative action, we're fighting for affirmative action for everyone that's been left out. You know, I-1000 passed in the legislature, but then it went to a referendum and it lost by 0.5%. It lost with 0.5%, and the 11th district has some of the lowest voter turnout in the state. What if we had a representative that would have organized the district to focus on something that would have united and brought together and made a tremendous difference from all people that were underrepresented in our education system? state jobs and state contracts. That's why I'm here. What if we had a representative that was focused on responsible gun laws, like 1639 and high capacity magazines, that were focused on protections for renters, knowing that people of color are much more likely to be evicted, and that eviction is one of the #1 cause of homelessness. So those are the issues that I would focus on.
Much. All right, final question. So we've touched on this a little bit about, just what we're able to accomplish at the state legislature and, the intricacies and the difficulties in working with the federal government or other state governments, right? When we talked about the California wildfires. What can we do in Washington state to support DACA students, regardless of how or what the federal government does to act or maybe not act? That's your question first, Mr. Hackney.
Sure. So, in essence, the #1 priority is the DREAM Act students who were brought here, prior to, at a young age and know nothing else but this community and culture. We have to do everything in our power. We've got the Attorney General, Bob Ferguson, who has been challenging the Trump administration whenever possible on their immigration issues. As an attorney, I recognize that a lot of the immigration issues are based at the federal level, but there's a lot we can do at the state level. We don't have to cooperate with ICE. We don't have to cooperate when they are detaining families and putting children in cages. We don't have to cooperate by recognizing their detainers that they have when we are releasing people out of our prison system. Non-violent offenders who are locked up and then are facing deportation to communities where they're not even familiar with. So we have to make the state of Washington a safe haven for DACA students, and to make sure that we don't, as the state, cooperate in the forced deportation of these individuals that are part of our community. These are people that have earned the right to remain in the United States, and we should be advocating on every level for their citizenship.
Yeah, thanks for that question. When I was working on the DREAM Act in Washington State as the prime sponsor, I met some of the most amazing kids. Kids that were picking apples in the orchards and were getting calls for internships at Google and Microsoft and trying to decide what to do that would help their family the most. Kids that were embarrassed that their parents were selling tamales outside of church in order to pay their college bills. Washington State is very friendly to immigrants. If we want to sell our apples and our airplanes and our software to the world, we need that talent. We need people that know how to embrace our American culture as well as other cultures as well. We have one of the most friendly healthcare systems for kids without authorized immigration status, our schools, our higher education. And I'll tell you, this is in direct contrast to my opponent. My opponent, when he was at DOJ, actually prosecuted immigrants. He prosecuted an immigrant who was coming across the border, who was actually found not to speak enough English or have the mental capacity to waive his Miranda rights. This is a direct conflict with the values of Washington State. I will continue to fight as hard as we can for the rule of law and to provide opportunity for kids because it is going to benefit all of us. The DREAM Act passed as the Real Hope Act because that was how we could bring Republicans along. I was able to set aside my name to make sure that kids got opportunity. And that's what I'm going to keep doing, is making sure that we're fighting for fairness and opportunity for everybody that lives in Washington.
Much, Representative Hudgens. It is now time for closing statements. And we have 2 minutes for those closing statements. Representative Hudgens, you have the honor of going first.
Thank you very much. Actually, I thought I had 1 minute, so my closing may be a little bit shorter. Thanks for this forum tonight. I think the contrast is clear between me and my opponent. For the last 2 decades, I've been active in our state and our community. I've served on the State Arts Commission, the State Technology Services Board. I'm on the State Historical Society Board. I'm on Speaker Lori Jenkins' Diversity and Inclusion Task Force. I've helped start the Fisher House for Veterans up on Beacon Hill. I've served on the board for the Domestic Abuse Women's Network. I'm active in the PTA and in scouting. My son is in 4th grade at our local public school. Those deep roots are why the community has elected me 9 times, because I listen to the community, I reflect those values in Olympia. My opponent has only voted once in the district. That's it, 1 time. He's actually never voted for Initiative 1000 in the 11th district. I think that's important, that I have 2 decades of experience of representing the district, of knowing where Cascade neighborhood is and Benson Hill, knowing about the annexation fights, and still serving the district with everybody on equal turf. I've passed groundbreaking legislation like the Breakfast After the Bell that feeds kids, or the DREAM Act, like I mentioned about DACA kids. I've fought for privacy against big tech and led Access to Democracy package. I've helped fund parks and housing, healthcare, education across the district. I've helped not just build housing across the district, but give more notice to renters to make sure that they've got more time to pay their big fees, of making sure that we fixed the housing bill that I voted against the first year and then voted for the second year, made sure that local governments have more tools. I am rooted and centered in our communities, and I want to continue that work. I would be honored to have your support. Thank you very much.
Hackney.
Sure. I've been a Democrat my whole life. In fact, I'm the only candidate in this race that's been endorsed by a Democratic organization. I've got the sole endorsement of the 11th Legislative District, the sole endorsement of the King County Democrats, and the sole endorsement of the King County Young Democrats. And it's because I'm an advocate for vulnerable communities and equity. I see the potential in the 11th LD to organize this community on critical issues, on local, county, and statewide candidates and initiatives to fight to solve the most important problems. We need to get the 11th district off the sidelines and into the game. We need someone to be fighting year round, not just at campaign time. So many of you may not have seen my opponent, except during campaign time. That's wrong. We need someone that is focused on the critical issues, not taking credit for everything that happens in the legislature, but focusing on their contribution. I'm a proud union grandson. I'm a first-generation attorney. I'm a gun violence survivor. And I experienced the lack of a healthcare safety net with the loss of my mother. I am going to be focused on critical issues and fighting for the people of the 11th district. I appreciate your votes in the primary. I was able to win by 4,000 votes and 12 percentage points. And I look forward to your support in the general election. The 11th district is ready for change and deserves someone to fight for them. If we don't do things differently, nothing's going to change. Choose David Hackney, and let's get together and fight for critical issues for the 11th district. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much to our candidates that joined us this evening. We really appreciate you taking the time. We know how busy it is during campaign season, so we appreciate that you prioritized making yourselves available to speak with our attendees directly and your constituents. We also really appreciate all of you who joined us today that submitted your questions and that watched. We really appreciate your engagement. Again, ballots should be arriving any day now. Please, please, please remember to vote. Thank you again to our committee sponsors, South King Media, the Highline Times, Seattle Southside Chamber of Commerce, the League of Women Voters, and King County Library Systems. Again, remember, vote. Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.